Fragments of the Chriae by Machon, found in Book 13 of the Deipnosophists by Athenaeus of Naucratis, and translated by CD Yonge, 1854. Fragment 1. Leaena. But as Leaena was by nature formed to give her lovers most exceeding pleasure, and was besides much favored by Demetrius, they say that Lamia also gratified the king, when he praised her grace and quickness. The woman answered, "And besides you can, if you wish, subdue a lioness." Fragment 2. Lamia. Demetrius the king was once displaying amid his cups a great variety of kinds of perfumes to his Lamia. Now Lamia was a female flute player with whom, 'tis always said, Demetrius was very much in love. But when she scoffed at all his perfumes, and moreover treated the monarch with exceeding insolence, he bade a slave bring some cheap unguent, while with his hands he felt himself, and smeared his fingers, and said, "At least smell this, O Lamia, and see how much this scent does beat all others." She laughingly replied, "But no, O king, that smell does seem to me the worst of all." "But," said Demetrius, "I swear by the gods that 'tis produced from a right royal nut." Fragment 3. Mania. Someone, perhaps one of those who hear this now, may fairly wonder how it came to pass that an Athenian woman had a name, or even a nickname, such as Mania. For 'tis disgraceful for a woman thus to bear a Phrygian name, she being too a courtesan from the very heart of Greece. And why was this permitted in the city of Athens, by which all other nations are much swayed? The fact is that her name from early childhood was this, Melita, and she grew up a trifle shorter than her playfellows, but with a sweet voice and engaging manners, and with such a beauty and excellence of face as made a deep impression upon all men. She had many lovers, foreigners and citizens, so that when any conversation arose about this woman, each said, "The fair Melita was his madness." Mania. Aye, and she herself contributed to this name, for when she jested she would often repeat this word, Mania. And when in sport she blamed or praised anyone, she would bring in either sentence, this word, Mania. So some one of her lovers, dwelling on the word, appears to have nicknamed the girl Mania, and this extra name prevailed more than her real one. It seems, besides, that Mania was afflicted with the stone, but Gnathaena was reproached by Diphilus because she soiled the bedclothes. And once, when Gnathaena was chiding Mania, she said, "How so, girl, even if you did have a stone?" And Mania replied, "I should have given it to you, you wretch, so you could wipe yourself clean." Fragment 4. The second fragment on Mania. There was a victor in the Pancratium named Leontiscus, who loved Mania, and kept her with him as his lawful wife. But finding afterwards that she did play the harlot with Antenor, was indignant. But she replied, "My darling, never mind. I only wanted to feel and prove in a single night how great the strength might be of two such athletes, victors at Olympia." They say again that Mania was once asked by King Demetrius for a perfect sight of her fair buttocks, and she, in return, demanded that he should grant her a favor. When he agreed, she turned her back and said, "O son of Agamemnon, now the gods grant you to see what you so long have wished for." On one occasion, too, a foreigner, who a deserter was believed to be, had come by chance to Athens, and he sent for Mania, and gave her all she asked. It happened that he had procured for supper some of those table jesters, common buffoons who always raise a laugh to please their feeders, and wishing to appear a witty man, used to polite his conversation, while Mania was sporting gracefully, as was her wont, and often rising up to reach a dish of hare, he tried to raise a joke upon her, and thus spoke, "My friends, tell me, I pray you by the gods, what animal you think runs fastest over the mountain tops?" "Why, my love, a deserter," answered Mania. Another time, when Mania came to see him, she laughed at the deserter, telling him that once in battle he had lost his shield. But this brave soldier, looking somewhat fierce, sent her away. And as she was departing, she said, "My love, don't be so much annoyed, for by Aphrodite it was not you who lost a shield when you ran away, but he who lent it to you." Another time, they say a man who was a thorough profligate did entertain Mania at supper, and when he questioned her, "Do you like being up or down the best?" she laughed and said, "I'd rather be up, my friend, for I'm afraid lest, if I lay me down, you'd bite my plaited hair from off my head." Fragment 5. Gnathaena. Diphilus was once drinking with Gnathaena, and he said, "Your cup is somewhat cold." And she replied, "'Tis no great wonder, Diphilus, for we take care to put some of your plays in it." Diphilus was once invited to a banquet at fair Gnathaena's house, as men do say, on the day of Aphrodite's festival, he being a man above her other lovers, beloved by her, though she concealed her flame. He came accordingly, and brought with him 2 jars of Chian wine, and 4 quite full of wine from Tassos, perfumes too, and crowns, sweetmeats, and venison, fillets for the head, fish, and a cook, and a female flute player. In the meantime, a Syrian friend of hers sent her some snow, and 1 saperda. She, being ashamed lest anyone would hear she had received such gifts, and above all men, fearing lest Diphilus should get at them, and show her up in one of his comedies, she bade a slave to carry off at once the salt fish to the men who wanted salt. As everyone did know, the snow, she told him, to mix with the wine unseen by anyone. And then she bade the boy to fill the cup with 10 full Chriae of wine, and bear it at once to Diphilus. He eagerly received the cup and drained it to the bottom, and marveling at the delicious coolness, said, "By Athena, and by all the gods, you must, Gnathaena, be allowed by all to have a most deliciously cool well." "Yes," she said, "for we carefully put in from day to day the prologues of your plays." A slave who had been flogged, whose back was marked with heavy scars, who once, as it fell out, was reposing with Gnathaena, then, as she embraced him, she found out how rough all over his back was. "O wretched man," said she, "in what engagement did you get these wounds?" He in a few words answered her, and said, that when a boy, once playing with his playmates, he'd fallen backwards into the fire by accident. "Well," said she, "if you were so wanton then, you well deserve to be flogged, my friend." Gnathaena once was supping with Gnathaena, who was a courtesan as well as she, and when Gnathaena put aside with care nearly all the dainty morsels for her mother, she said, "I swear by Artemis, had I known how you went on, Gnathaena, I would rather have gone to supper with your mother than you." When this Gnathaena was advanced in years, hastening, as all might see, towards the grave, they say she once went into the market, and looked at all the fish, and asked the price of every article she saw. And seeing a handsome butcher standing at his stall, a man in the flower of youth, "Oh, in God's name tell me, my youth, what is your price today?" He laughed and said, "Why, if I stoop 3 obols." "But who," said she, "did give you leave, you wretch, to use your Carian weights in Attica?" Stratocles once made all his friends a present of kids and shellfish greatly salted, seeming to have dressed them carefully, so that his friends should the next morning be overwhelmed with thirst, and thus protract their drinking, so that he might draw from them some ample contributions. Therefore Gnathaena said to one of her lovers, seeing him wavering about his offerings, "After the kids, Stratocles brings a storm." Gnathaena, seeing once a thin young man of black complexion, lean as any scarecrow, reeking with oil and shorter than his fellows, called him in jest Adonis. When the youth answered her in a rude and violent manner, she, looking on her daughter who was with her, said, "Ah, it serves me right for my mistake." They say that one fine day a youth from Pontus was sleeping with Gnathaena, and at morning he asked her to display her buttocks to him. But she replied, "You have no time, for now it's the hour to drive the pigs to feed." Fragment 6. Gnathaenion. It happened once that a very aged satrap, a full 90 years of age, had come to Athens, and on the feast of Cronus he beheld Gnathaenion with Gnathaena going out from a fair temple sacred to Aphrodite. And noticing her form and grace of motion, he inquired how much she asked a night. Gnathaena, looking on his purple robe and princely bodyguard, said, 1,000 drachmas. He, as if smitten with a mortal wound, said, I perceive because of all these soldiers you look upon me as a captured enemy. But take 5 minae and agree with me, and let them get a bed prepared for us. She, as the satrap seemed a witty man, received his terms, and said, Give what you like, O father, for I know most certainly you'll give my daughter twice as much at night. There was at Athens once a handsome smith, when she, Gnathaenion, had almost abandoned her trade and would no longer be common, moved by the love of the actor Andronicus, but at this moment he was gone away, after she brought him a male child. This smith then long besought the fair Gnathaenion to fix her price, and though she long refused, by long entreaty and liberality, at last he won her over to consent. But being but a rude and ill-bred clown, he, one day sitting with some friends of his in a leather cutter's shop, began to talk about Gnathaenion to divert their leisure, saying that he had never consorted with her in any other way except that she rode on top of him 5 times over. But after this, when Andronicus came from Corinth back again, and heard the news, he bitterly reproached her, and at supper he said, with just complaint, unto Gnathaenion, that she had never granted him such liberties as this flogged slave had allowed him. And then they say Gnathaenion thus replied, that she was her own mistress, and the smith was so begrimed with soot and dirt that she did not wish to embrace him. But after receiving a large sum of gold, she gave in to his request, and cleverly contrived to touch the part of him which, although small, stuck out the furthest. One day they say Gnathaenion at supper would not kiss Andronicus when he wished, though she had done so every day before. But she was angry that he gave her nothing. So he said on this, Gnathaena, don't you see how haughtily your daughter's treating me? And she, indignant, said, You wretched girl, take him and kiss him if he wishes it. But she replied, Why should I kiss him, mother? He who does no good to anyone in the house, but seeks to have hollow argos all for free. Once on a day of a festival, Gnathaenion went down to the Piraeus to be with a lover, who was a foreign merchant. Riding cheaply on a poor mule, and having after her 3 donkeys, 3 maidservants, and 1 nurse, then, at a narrow spot in the road, they met with one of those poor wrestlers, men who contrive to lose their battles in return for pay, and, as he could not pass by easily, being crowded up, he said, You wretched man, you donkey driver, if you get not quickly out of my way, I will upset these women, and all the donkeys and mule to boot. But quick Gnathaenion said, My friend, I pray you, don't be so valiant now when you have never done any feat of spirit or strength before. Fragment 7. Anecdotes. They say that Lais the Corinthian, once when she saw Euripides in a garden holding a tablet and a pen attached to it, cried out to him, Now answer me, my poet, what was your meaning when you wrote in your play, Away, you shameless doer? And Euripides, amazed and wondering at her audacity, said, Why, you seem to me yourself to be a shameless doer. And she, laughing, answered, How shameless, if my partners do not think so? Glycerion once received from some lover a new Corinthian cloak, with purple sleeves, and gave it to a fuller. Afterwards, when she thought he had time enough to clean it, she sent her maidservant to fetch it back, giving her money that she might pay for it. But, said the fuller, you must bring me first 3/4 of the oil, for want of that is what hindered me from finishing it. The maid went back and told her mistress all. Wretch that I am, Glycerion said, for he is going to fry my cloak like any herring. Demophoon, the friend of Sophocles, while a young man, fell furiously in love with Nico, called the Goat, though she was old, And she had earned this name of the goat because she quite devoured once a mighty friend of hers, named Taulus, when he came to Attica to buy some Chelidonian figs, and also to export some honey from the Himetian hill. And it is said that this woman had fair buttocks, and when Demophoon tried to hold them, "A pretty thing," said she, "that will you get from me. You may present to Sophocles." Callisto once, who was nicknamed the Sow, was fiercely quarreling with her own mother, who was also nicknamed the Crow. Gnathaena appeased the quarrel, and when asked the cause of it, said, "What else could it be but that one crow was finding fault with the blackness of the other?" Men say that Hippe once, the courtesan, had a lover named Theodotus, a man who at the time was prefect of the granaries, and she on one occasion late in the evening came to the banquet of King Ptolemy, and she had been often used to drink with him. So, as she now was very late, she said, "I'm very thirsty, Papa Ptolemy, so let the cupbearer pour me 4 cotylli into a large cup." The king replied, "You must have it in a platter, for you seem already, Hippe, to have had plenty of hay." A man named Mauricus was courting Phryne, the Thespian girl, and as she required a mina, "'Tis a mighty sum," said Mauricus. "Did you not yesterday charge a foreigner 2 little pieces of gold? Wait till I want you, and I will take the same from you." 'Tis said that Nico, who was called the goat, once when a man named Python had deserted her and taken up with the great fat Euarchus, after a time did again send for her. So she said to the slaves who came to fetch her, "Now that Python is well sated with his swine, does he desire to return to the goat?" End of The Fragments of the Chriae by Machon, found in Book 13 of the Deipnosophists by Athenaeus.